guess this will be another dashboard confessional, which I said I wouldn't make a habit of doing. But I woke up this morning, I was thinking about the job. I'm going to use some names because they're important to the story, I think. After I show it to my wife and some people, maybe my daughter will edit them out. But there's a plumber on Cat's house. Shit. I think I might just have to wait for the light on this one. And part of the reason I bring it up with this plumber is this plumber's father's uncle, something. You know, they all worked together back in the day when I was working for another name I'm going to mention, Bill Jenkins. William H. Jenkins III, I believe. And William H. Jenkins III, if I got the name right, was the guy who I finally settled in with and said, this is the guy that I'm going to trust. This is the guy that I'm going to follow. This is the guy that I'm going to teach. Or it's going to teach me. And it just so happens that 30 some years later, myself and this plumber Scott Zahn end up on a framing job together, talking about the old days and how we were brought up, what's right and what's wrong. It's kind of interesting how it's a small world. But then one of the not the project manager, but I guess we'll call him the superintendent, the new superintendent that's working on Cat's job, had said at one point, after I found out that, you know, all the nails and all the hangers apparently were incorrect, and I was like, I've never heard of this, pleading my case. And he was like, you know, at some point he said, I think this superintendent said, I think people just do what they were taught, and they do what they were taught and they think it's right, which is not a far-fetched statement. Because there really isn't any standard, especially for wood frame residential construction. I mean, there's a building code. But there's no real recipe how to build a house. There's what they will not allow. And Scott, the plumber, made a statement about the fact that when he was in this when he was in plumbing school or learning how to be a plumber, that his teacher or his professor or whoever it was, now this was not his father, or his uncle or whoever, whatever relative that Bill Jenkins and the Zahn of that time were working together. But this was an actual educator, teacher, professor, whatever you want to call it. And Scott made the statement that at the time, his teacher, professor said, "You must always respect the residential plumber and or tradesman, because they have to figure it out on their own." Which is a true statement, because it's been quite the quite the transition for this new contractor on Cat's House, where anything from light switches to plumbing fixtures to how point A gets to point B is mapped out on a set of plans. That does not exist in residential construction, and it took them a while to get their head around the fact that there just aren't documents for certain things. You know, everybody keeps expecting to go to an electrical plan or a plumbing plan or a framing plan or what have you. It doesn't exist, which is probably the problem with residential construction, because as I said, there's a building code that says what is not allowed, but there's nothing on paper that says what is allowed or what should be. So I don't want to use the term uneducated, because, as I said, Scott was educated formally in the field of plumbing, and electricians were educated in the field of electrical design. HVAC were educated. I'm not sure about masons, but the one thing that is not required and educated and licensed, where you have to actually pass a test to prove your competency at what you're doing, is framing, which 30 years ago the debate was going on, and it's going on now. It's kind of incomprehensible. I mean, after the footings and the masonry, the thing that holds the house up is the framing, and there is no to my knowledge, I've been wrong before, and even if there is, it's probably wrong. There's no educational system. That's not true. There's no regulated way of framing a house. There's industry standards and accepted practices, and there's code. But you can pretty much do whatever the hell you want residential framing, and you can camouflage it however you like. And if you've got, you know, a local county inspector that is not on his A game, you can get away with it, which is not necessarily the case with all the other subs, because all the other subs have to be educated, have licenses, degrees, or whatever, apprenticeships, journeymen. But the framer can pick up a hammer and nail two boards together and proclaim that he's a genius because he built a doghouse, which is kind of what happened at Cat's house. To the superintendent's point, you had a guy, I guess, he either did what he was taught or he did what he thought was right when he was 20 years old, and he kept doing it for 40 years. And no one ever stopped him. So, in his mind, he's a genius. I mean, I can make the argument the other way. I mean, I know for a fact he did things that he knew. That he knew was wrong. He just didn't want to do it. He just, like I said before in another video, he just wanted to do what he wanted to do, get his paycheck and go home. But there's something to be said for having a standard and a regulation, an education. Just can't give somebody a box of nails and a hammer and say you're a framer, because there is more to it than meets the eye. And I go back to Bill Jenkins, the guy that, you know, I worked for a lot of people before I finally settled into Bill, because I felt like Bill had something to offer me with knowledge, and he did. He taught me a lot of stuff that, I mean, most framers today don't have a clue. But one of those simple little things that Bill taught me that always made sense to me, and I tried to teach my son, and hopefully do. Still in the frame. Is the idea of path of load and all your studs. Doesn't matter if you're in the foundation or you're in the attic. Every stud should stack. And what I mean by saying stack is it should be a perfectly straight line of studs from the footing, foundation, to its terminating point in the rafters. That includes the cripples on the gables, the gable overhangs. Everything stacks. Because a lot of, the majority of framers today, it doesn't matter where they are, when they lay out a wall, they cut the wall plates and they hook the plate and they start pulling 1632, 4864, and they're a genius. But the wall below them may have been pulled from a different place. And what they end up with is this dragon stagger tooth set of framing, which causes at least two things in my recent memory to happen. One, to Bill Jenkins' point, and two, Scott Zahn's uncle or whatever, and why Bill Jenkins and his uncle got along so famously, was you can be a plumber in a crawl space, you know, running whatever, your drain lines or your stub ups, and you drill a hole up through the bottom plate, the subfloor, come up in the bathroom, and you trying to get to the second floor bathroom. So you go in the exact same cavity and you drill a hole with your drill bit or your hole saw. You get about a ½ inch in, all of a sudden you start cutting on nails. And you start destroying a $30 hole saw. You throw your shoulder out of socket because that hole hog bites up and slams you into the wall. What I'm trying to say is, if you don't stack your studs in the subs behind you, start at the bottom and work up, and they start hitting nails because you didn't pay attention, and they start hitting the stud on the top floor, then they got to change their plan. They got to divert. They got to add a 90 to their plumbing. They got to make their HVAC turn. They got to start chopping top plates out. They got to do a whole lot of shit, which additionally fucks up my house. So that made sense to me. I always respected it, and that's what I always tried to do. With the added bonus, as things change, as they always do in residential framing, as you start moving walls, changing headers, windows, whatever, if you take the time to make everything stack, you always know where you have a path of load to the footing, because you know everything stacks. So you can move a wall or move a header or whatever, and before you have to crawl up in there and roll another beam in or whatever. I mean, I'm just making. You can say, okay, I know I got a path to the footing right here, and I know I can pick that load up with a header or a block or something. But you can't do that if you're running 3 floors and you got some guy that's just pulling layout willy-nilly, however the hell he wants to. And the other thing, there's a lot of reasons for doing this, but the other thing that I didn't learn till later is it's kind of ingenious when you think about it. It's the savings in material. If everything stacks and you start your layout, your plywood from, let's say, the east corner, and you're working west, and you come to a corner, you drop your last piece of plywood on that corner, and it's, let's just say, 33 inches. You pop a line, cut it off. Well, the drop of that 48-inch piece of plywood, as you cut to 33 inches, the remainder immediately starts the next run of plywood. So you don't lose that material if you do it correctly. If you stack your studs and you cut your plywood at each corner, whatever falls off will start the next run of plywood, so you lose nothing. And those guys that every time they lay out a wall start at 16, 32, 48, 64, 80, 96, and so on, they're wasting so much material because they got to drop a new sheet of plywood on every wall, and they can't use their drops. I mean, they could use them for filler or headers or whatever. It's just inefficient. But I got on this rant because I was thinking about that statement that Scott said about always respect the residential plumber and tradesman and even the framer, even though he didn't say that, because they really do. They have to figure it out. Because in reality, at least in my mind, the plans you get, I'd say at least 9 times out of 10 are concept drawings, even the structural architectural. Because as we've pointed out on this particular job, the two aren't really in communication with each other. You got an architect who draws a set of plans as a concept. He sends it off to a structural engineer who supposedly designs the structure to the architectural. But as we have found out, he designs his structure according to his structure and not according to the architectural drawings. And the two don't always overlap. The architect is not a structural engineer, so when he gets the drawings back, he doesn't necessarily know what the hell he's looking at. So he signs off on them. And they send the architectural plans and the structural plans to the TJI and truss manufacturers. And they don't realize that what they're looking at is not coordinated. So they design their drawings. And again, as we pointed out and illustrated on Catch House, they build off mistakes. So their drawings don't match the architectural or the structural. And we have yet another set of drawings that are fucked up. So they send their drawings back to the structural guy. He doesn't pay attention, so he signs off on it, sends it back to the architect. He doesn't pay attention, he signs off on it. All of a sudden, you send these 3 sets of drawings, concept drawings, to a 20-some-year-old kid who has no formal education whatsoever in the art of construction and framing and carpentry. And he has to rely on his knowledge and experience based on whoever has educated him or his own devices. And if that individual, as is often the case, has not had, let's say, a good mentor, he's going to do stupid shit. And he's going to do stupid shit, and he's going to get away with it. And the next time he builds a structure, he's going to say, well, I did it like this, and I got away with it, and it worked, so I'm going to do it again. And he does it again. And he does that for 40 years. And his mind, he can do no wrong. And when he does wrong, he thinks it's okay because he thinks he's smarter than he is. Hey, we had some water come through here. But as we have found out recently with the hanger and nail debacle, I was doing shit wrong for 30 some years. I didn't have a clue that those hangers, supposedly, I'm still trying to defend my position, but required 3.5-inch nails. And I thought I was a genius. So I am not infallible. No one is. But it just goes to show you the importance of being educated properly, whether it be a professor in college or an old school carpenter. Goddamn fucking shoulder. Or a plumber. Or a combination of all of them. Because really, you come down to it, it's the guys building the house. That, I mean, if you got the right combination of people, they look out for each other. The mason looks out for the framer, and the framer looks out for the plumber, and the plumber looks out for the HVAC guy. You know, it just goes down the line. If you got the right group of people that care, residential framing can work. But you interject a money-grubbing builder who's chasing a dollar, and that combination we had back in the 80s doesn't exist anymore that I'm aware of, which is unfortunate. Because that was the only way shit got done right back then. Now you just do whatever the hell you want. You wait for the inspector to catch it, and he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and then you fix it and move on. Got a giant piece of shit of a house. But anyway, that's my rant for the day. Dashboard Confessionals. I guess I'll show it to Ange and Scott, I guess, and see if he minds me using his name. And maybe I'll post it. But I'm at work.